Welcome, everybody, to Event Marketing Redefined. Really awesome having everybody here today. This is the kickoff of our summer tour. I hope we see you at the summer tour. We're trying to give people more insight to the guests, who's coming on, what we're talking about, and hopefully those are of interest to you. Today, I have Mr. Doug Foley, president of Giant Goat Marketing. And just a heads up, Doug and I have known each other since college. He is a buddy of mine and one of the sharpest guys I know. So Doug, welcome, my friend.
Matt, thanks so much for having me. Same for you. It's been so cool to see both your career and your business explode over the last few years, especially kind of how you endured COVID. Like your leadership through that was amazing, just not for your company, but the industry as a whole. So really excited to join you.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. I would love to mention your book for anybody here because I read it, and The Breakout Blueprint is a book that Doug wrote, and I would recommend it to anybody. It is over his left shoulder, right? You have your left shoulder front facing there. Excellent. Really good read, quick read, easy read, inspiring read. So go grab that if you are interested in it. Douglas, today, my friend, we're going to talk about pre-show, post-show, all the marketing that goes involved in making sure that you have successful events, right? I talk about this a ton. And I'm just a firm believer that like trade shows and events, that strategy that companies and brands are utilizing, it is a strategy, number one, but it's a sales and marketing function, and sales and marketing functions really require that strategic approach. And obviously pre and post are two of the pieces really that go into an event. So give me, or us, the audience here, a little background on you, because you are not just in the marketing space, but you have worked in the trade show space, the event space, and your career's kind of run through those areas a bunch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my first job, like if I go way back through high school, I worked as an event person, setting up shows, traveling, working those part-time jobs. I worked as a salesperson throughout my career on the trade show floor, sweating it out. I've seen it done well. I've seen it done poorly. I've worked for exhibit companies, selling booths, selling, the marketing surrounding it, run agencies and promotions. And, now we are regularly on the agency side helping to run it. And one of the biggest things across my career, the ones that did it well and the ones were successful, they treated the trade show as an investment, not as an expense. And I know it's something you guys talk about a lot, but they put a ton of effort into making sure there was a pre-show campaign. They held salespeople accountable for the follow-up afterwards. And those are kind of the two dovetails. Like the at show, we can dive into a lot, but those two dovetails of the investment and investing in trade shows are the two pieces where I see a lot of people neglect the importance of. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to get a bigger ROI if you focus on what you do before and after the event.
Yeah. So I love what we're saying here, right? So my biggest pet peeve is companies treating their events, their trade shows as just a cost of doing business versus as this is a strategy to push company initiatives to create ROI or whatever it is, whatever your intentionality, whatever you're trying to accomplish, you're saying, hey, this is a strategy to go help pursue that. Essentially, what we're going to do today is we're going to really try to get into more detail as to how to do this. And Doug, we were talking prior, and I think it's a great place to kick off. You just finished working with a company doing a training, right? And it was training for sales, but it really overlaps and pushing into an event that they have that's coming up. I'd love for you to touch on that a little bit because I think it's such a piece of prepping for trade shows and events.
Absolutely. This is really important, especially in the B2B space. We have a client, they have one pillar event per year. And it's when I would say 80% of their sales are conducted. And prior to working with us, I think this is probably consistent across the industry. Most cases, the marketing team bears the brunt of putting on the trade show. They do all the pre-show stuff. They send out flyers. They do direct mail. What we changed is we started to bring the sales team in 12 weeks before the event. And we sat down with them and we developed a training and laid out, here's the entire campaign leading up to the event. Here's what we're doing at the event. And here's the responsibility afterwards. And we assigned very specific KPIs to what we hold them accountable to. So for example, we need each rep in a given region, we need you to bring 3 to 5 people on these specific dates. Like these are the main KPIs you're held accountable to. And every week leading up to the event, they report back and say, hey, here's where we're at. Here's the challenges we have, or here's the success we're having. And then we go in and we plan the next week. So it's very detailed and specific to what we need the sales team to do. And then the marketing team has a chance to reply and respond, make adjustments. But we did some of that last year, but decided this year we're actually going to make a very dedicated plan. We created planning sheets for the sales team so they can sit down weekly and figure out like, hey, who are our top customers? Are they coming to the show? How do we figure out how to get 20% growth with those customers, knowing like they're going to be here with the intent to buy? And then we built an incentive program or a pricing program that has a time window. So within 20 days of the post show, your early bird pricing ends. You know, it's scarcity, one of the fundamentals of marketing, but everything was lined up. The sales team's trained. They know the deadlines, the terms and conditions. They understand the whole campaign and they know, hey, this is what I must do, what I'm accountable to. And if there's any traction fans, we're basically just applying some of those traction principles into marketing and sales. And I found when you do that, that's when you win. But when they're desperate or separate, that's when you get sales guys showing up. They're like, oh, trade shows don't work, or they're just there to drink beer. And you get zero results.
You know what I love about what you just said on that piece, and I thought it was great to kick off, is number one, you're talking about buy-in, right? You're saying marketing, the company, we need buy-in from really the stakeholders for what trade shows or an events do. It really is marketing and sales. And look, some of these bigger companies, they have a go-to-market team, they have a marketing team, they have an event team, they have a sales team. They're all segmented to a degree. And I do know from working with our customers, they have challenges within those. Events team has a challenging time getting things from marketing. You know what I mean? Sales, getting the information from events or everybody. So, but the idea is if you're in this seat, and we have a question here from Rachel, which I think touches right on this that we can get to, but when you're in that seat, getting buy-in and getting sales on your bus to go to an event is huge. And in my opinion, people want to know pre-show what to do, get sales literally pushing the bus. It's not a market. It is marketing, but if you can get sales pushing the bus, you can get some serious traction there. We have a question. Thank you, Rachel, asking a question right away. This is excellent. Love them. Do you have any tips on pre-event strategy when you are fairly new to breaking into the industry of events, no previous year data, and you don't have a pre-event list? Yes, Rachel, just what Doug just said, sales, go to your sales team, right? Who's at that show? Are they prospecting anybody going to be there? I'll let Doug get to it, but I think like when you don't have that data to effectively market, you're going to your sales team saying, hey, or your stakeholders, why are we here? Who are we going after? Make sure you're aligned on the basics of what you're trying to do. Then I'm getting with sales saying like, hey, if these are our targets, who's prospecting them, who's in communication with them, and giving them all the resources they need, whether it's after dinner parties, engagements going on in the booth. How are you going to effectively get them and say, hey, we're going to be there. I'm going to be there. I've been prospecting you 6 months, but I want to come talk to you. I want you to stop by and come talk to me. Here's a reason why. Doug, I'll let you kind of jump in there.
One of the biggest things, and Rachel, while we're answering this, if you don't mind clarifying, is this for you breaking into the industry or the company? But I'm going to just take a stab at how you have it. One of the biggest things we see, and this isn't so company perfect, the biggest thing we see across the board is some clarity. Like the clearer you are with what you're trying to accomplish at the show, you then can back out some specific goals. So for example, in the building industry, they have a lot of buying shows where literally companies are coming to make their commitments and transacting. Your goals and what you need to inform the sales team there is very different. In a buying show, you better get every single possible customer you can there and close as many orders as possible. So the onus is going to be on the sales team of like, how do we create an environment where it's easier to transact and close deals? If, for example, your show is more, hey, we're here to introduce ourselves, we're a new brand, we're just trying to make a footprint, you're trying to make a splash, well, then those goals may rely heavily more so on marketing marketing. So your sales team become more of a distribution mechanism. They're going to be spreading the word like, hey, as Matt mentioned, like give them a reason to come see you. And beyond the tchotchkes, like, yeah, everyone likes to take home the stuff from trade show booth to give to their kids, but create something of purpose, like make it memorable so that there is something to follow up. And this, which I know will lead into towards the second half of the show, what do you want to do after? And this is a piece that everyone missed. This is no different than like a web page. If you have a landing page, like if you drive traffic to something, what do you want them to do after? Like, do you want them to come to the booth and have a conversation and then book a meeting afterwards, or book a demo after, or have a salesperson call on you? The clearer you are about the post event and what you want to happen, the easier it is to understand what type of experience do you need to curate at the event to make the next step possible. And all of the marketing, whether it's trade shows, whether it's websites, we use an acronym called TACTICS. And it's a specific checklist we go through with everybody. It makes it easier to do pre and post. It simply stands for traffic. Where are we getting our traffic sources from? Action. What do we want them to do when they get there? C is the commitment or the micro commitment. Like, do we want them to spend time with us? Do we want to get their email address? Do we want to get their phone number? Do we want them to scan a QR code and then they're going to receive something afterwards? The most important piece, and this is what I'm leading to at the post traffic, is the ICS. It's their first impression. When they meet you or they walk by your booth, if you're at the show and you got a bunch of sales guys just sitting there shooting the breeze and they're ignoring people, it's intimidating. Nobody wants to walk in there. And that's their first impression of a brand. And I'd say it's akin, if you're car shopping, you walk into the lot and everyone ignores you, you're probably going to hop in your car and leave. Same thing's true at a trade show event. And then last piece is customer service. If you tell somebody, hey, I'm going to follow up with you in a week, and it's 2 months, that's indicative of what it's going to be like to work with you. So I'm less likely to take you at your word. So these pieces, and when we use that TACTICS acronym to set up campaigns, it's just that quick checklist to figure out, do I have the clarity of what I want that experience to be and what it's leading to? Then I can reverse engineer what my pre-show has to look like.
Yeah, I think that's good. And Rachel, I think it's good that you clarified the company. I would stress with what Doug is saying. If you are new walking in that door and you don't have a ton of data, get with your stakeholders, ask about why. Ask the good, why are we here? What's our intention? Who are we going after? What's the purpose? Have we yielded results in the past? What's worked? What's not? You got to start digging to understand all that, because I think once you understand that big picture, then you can start thinking, okay, I don't have great data. And my pre-event strategy really, in my opinion, should be centered around what Doug just said, which I think is customer intent, right? What is their intent at this show? Not your intent. What's theirs? Why are they there? They're saying, is it a buyer show? There's all different kinds. People are there for education. There people are there to buy. There's, people there to look at new technology. There's a million reasons. But if you understand why they are there, then I think you can really figure out how to pre-market them and capture them there. Doug, we got another question, which I think works perfectly into what we're talking about. So Rhett, thanks for the question. Rhett says, trade shows typically have way too much going on. He's talking about contest here, game here, handout here, video here, no focus. How do you get clients beyond the gimmicks and focus on what their goals should and could be? Rhett, great question. And I think it really goes back to what Doug and I were just saying, right? There is too much going on. There is too much crap. There is too much run-of-the-mill stuff. To me, it is, if you are going, who is your audience? Who is your customer? Why are they there? What are they there for? What are they seeking? And then from there, and I'll give you an example. We just exhibited, well, not just, it was in April, but we exhibited, and one of our major engagements inside of our booth was this podcast. We built a podcast set and we invited who we would consider to be potential clients or event marketers, and not to like stalk and prey on them, but we want to hear from them. We want to get to know them. What's their problems? What's their concerns? What are they striving for? So we ran a podcast as an engagement. I don't think it was gimmicky. I don't think it was a handout. I get exactly what you're saying. So that's one example, but I'll let Doug kind of run here.
It's funny. I steal Matt's example all the time because I'm so impressed with what they did. But I will tell you, and I know, Jeff, you asked a question too about video. So we might kill two birds with one stone here. Having a podcast is probably one of the biggest Trojan horses if you do it with the right intent. And bringing
Yeah.
that experience to a show, if you truly intend to listen and understand your ideal customers, inviting them on a show, it not only brings them into your booth and you get to learn, but you're going to attract bystanders. People can't help but watch something live or watch people speak. Like, people love to watch that type of experience. So if you're creating some type of experience that's worth looking at or worth engaging with, that's going to get people to the booth. I've seen other people do game shows where they kind of have celebrity hosts or, maybe industry icons or influencers at their booth. That's good for getting engagement. But again, to Matt's point, the better you are at understanding the intent of the goal for people being at the show, and the better you can execute that experience while they're there, then you're going to have a better follow through post show. I would rather have 10 of the perfect people stop by my booth and have 1,000 other people walk by and have the best intent post show than worry about just high traffic and people coming to buy because I'm giving away Yetis. Okay. I'm not Yeti. I don't sell Yetis. That's not the attention I'm looking for. And it's cool. Like, if you put together a really meaningful gift bag and people are there, they come with the intent, and that's what gets them with a hurdle, great. But if you can help them solve a bigger goal, that's there. Now, for B2B, if you don't have them committed before the show and you're just hoping they stop by, your chances are exponentially lower. Like, you're hoping for a chance encounter. That's why pre-show is so vital. And Matt, if you're cool, I'm going to skip to Jeff's question about video.
I actually have a comment on video as well. So go ahead.
Okay. So your pre-show, if you're B2B, this can work in consumer. We're going to focus a little bit B2B for now. If you're willing to take the time and it's free, you can go something called Loom. Go shoot a Loom video and send it to your ideal prospects. Take the time to show them, like, hey, Matt, really excited to see you at the show. Hopefully you're going to be attending. We're going to be at booth 1, 2, 3, 4. When you get there, look for me. I have something specific to help you solve XYZ problem. If you can just reply and confirm what days you might stop by, I'll make sure I'm in the booth to see you. Just be very intentful and actively prospect. And I know that leading into shows, and this is why, going back to Matt's original question, why we put so much work. When you get alignment between sales and they're accountable and they're doing the activities, you will have exponentially better results than you've ever seen before.
So Jeff, when I'm thinking video, there's a few things. So we actually thought about for ourselves, obviously this is what we do for a living. So we're trying to practice what we preach. So we're trying to get creative. One of the things that I thought about was there is a company, you can look them up on LinkedIn. They're called Lavender. They do some really creative video marketing, in my opinion. And there's another one, I forget the name of the company. They do some really funny videos. Now, these are produced, so it does depend on budget. It does depend on what you have, but they've built these campaigns. Lavender does a good job with what I would say, low budget, creative type. And then this other company I'm talking about, I gotta remember the name if I come up with it, but they did some more little higher level production, but coming up with something that is like funny, humorous, a little bold to draw attention to and build a campaign around. Now that does take some budget though, right? My other thought is using the event to create video that you then repurpose to extend the life of the event and promote yourself at following events, right? Because I think when you're at an event, you can really use anything from drone footage to podcast footage to just B-roll, whatever it may be, to create videos that you can then use down the line. So it's another thought is like leverage the in-person event to create content for down the road, which will help you pre-market yourself and post-market yourself.
To build on that, like one of the best things you can do as a salesperson, if you're at the actual event, go around and record yourself just doing, hey, I'm at XYV event this week. Here's the 3 top things I've learned, or the 3 top things doing, or hey, here's where you can find the best coffee spot if the lines are too long at X. Go into Twitter, go into social, just post those little things. You said, hey, if you come find me, coffee's on me. Like you can gamify the at show event using video and break through some of the clutter. Real simple, like iPhone, if you have like earpods, audio matters, but like Matt said, and then even post event, if you can do a wrap up, if it's more of like an informational event, like most marketing conferences, for example, like, hey, here's the 10 trends out of X show, break down that and do a video, post it on LinkedIn, Twitter, and then just follow up with anybody that engages. One other quick thing, and this is more something we've done recently within LinkedIn, leading up to the event, at the event, post show, however you want to curtail the copy, using LinkedIn polls is really effective because it allows you to see who has engaged with your post and you can instantly follow up and DM those people. So even if something as simple as like, hey, who's going to X conference? And don't be afraid to go into some event groups and post that. Like if there's an industry association, you want to know who's going. If you're a salesperson, go into those. You can do it with video, like post a video, say, hey, really excited to be going to this. Who else is coming? Just leave a little poll below. Boom, there you're going to curate a list of people, send them a DM before the event. Hey, I noticed you replied, you're going to be at the event. Let's connect. I'm taking a bunch of people out for whatever.
Last piece I have on this, it just got me thinking. I have a friend of mine. He went to the Amazon, has their own trade show. It's like a reseller show. So he was exhibiting his company. He had a small booth there. He asked, I thought this was very creative. He asked me to do a podcast with him. And what he was going to do, he interviewed me and asked me all these questions about how to get the most out of a trade show, how to get the most out of an event, how to get the most out of networking and being at this conference. He then took that, made all these videos and sent it out to a lot of the exhibitors and the attendees like 3-4 weeks prior to the show, and as a gift, saying like, hey, we're all going to be at this show. I know we're all looking to gain something from it. Here's some tips from a person in trade shows and events. That I thought was interesting, and it was all video content, so it was easy to consume. That was pretty sharp. Another question we have here from Bianca is, this is interesting. How do you get buy-in when there is doubt? So I like this question, Bianca, because I think what I would say is my first thought would lead me to what is the doubt and why is there doubt? I would be trying to get to the root of what their doubt is. And that would probably be from speaking to customers, people that maybe didn't buy from you, people that have that doubt for some reason, whatever it may be. I would be looking to pick away at that and try to understand it as best as I could and find a pattern. And from there, honestly, I don't know what it would be. I'd make some kind of bold play though, bold statement, bold engagement, bold maneuver to put the elephant in the room. People love when you put the elephant in the room. They love it. It's like an icebreaker. So I don't know what that is. That's vague advice, but that's the path that I would start down personally. Doug, I don't know if you have anything on this.
Maybe if you can clarify, do you mean get buy-in when there's doubt? Is that for registering for a show? Or like getting buy-in to attend a show after you registered? Okay. So if there's doubt about the show, one of the things we're huge on, we do this with all campaigns across the board, is when we run behind, we have kill dates. So this goes back to creating accountability within the sales teams. So if you have certain dates, like you can withdraw from the show, start setting milestones in the ground. Like, hey, if we don't have X% committed by this date, we're out. And you can start to put the onus on some pre-registrations. And it doesn't have to be registrations for an event. Just figure out what those certain mileposts are and use those to make informed decisions. A lot of doubt is usually created because it's either the intent is not clear, the strategy and the execution is not clear, or there's no clear outcome or expectation post-show. And the same is like the place in the sales process. Like if I don't know what I'm getting out of it, that's usually why people don't commit. So when you see that, that's where I would just start to ask the questions on what is the doubt about? And then what do we need to clarify to make sure like how we're approaching the show or what we need in the sales process is crystal clear and what the benefits are going to be. The other big piece, especially in making decisions, is what if we don't do it? Like, what is the flip side? What are the risks associated with other people that may step in, take the customers? Is there a big financial penalty if you withdraw past certain date, et cetera?
Great question, Bianca. Thanks for everybody for kicking these questions around. Let's jump back into something which I think is kind of okay. I'm a company, right? You and me are a company, and we are going to go exhibit at a trade show, right? We think it's a good show. Obviously, we've done our homework. We believe our audience is there. Let's start talking about what is our pre-show strategy, execution? What are we thinking about? What are we doing? What's happening months prior here?
So I'm going to switch between two things. One is like your tactical, you better have a pre-show checklist, like making sure that you're doing all of like the mechanical tactical things, ordering the booth, doing that. If you're not, go see Matt. Their team will help you with that. So I'm going to assume you have a good trade show company you're working with, and that headache's gone. From the strategic perspective, when it gets to pre-show, one of the single most important things we do is we use a sequence called a Fibonacci sequence. And if you've ever looked it up, it's kind of that, it looks like that big shell. If you don't have an email cadence being sent out to your audience or your ideal prospects, mirrored by your sales team, that goes at least 3 weeks out from the show, ideally 6, you are leaving 80% of your opportunities on the table. That is the one thing we have implemented for people that has driven unbelievable success in terms of show up rates. And then that exact same sequence is actually mirrored post-show. And what a Fibonacci sequence is it's basically the closer you get to an event, the higher the frequency of messages get. And the same thing post-show, the further away it decreases. So it's just a mechanism, and it's been proven by science because it's a naturally reoccurring sequence. When you deploy that, and it works both for programming your social media, for your emails, and your sales outreach. And if you have specific scheduled dates and people are held accountable to those things, you will see just a massive increase because it just puts people on a plan, and it avoids the chaos of missing crucial dates and timelines.
What about data, right? Because I know data in the trade show world, it's just a huge fight, right? It's a fight from the associations and the organizers. They obviously don't want to release all the data to all the exhibitors and sponsors because they think they'll just spam them. But then the exhibitors and the sponsors, if they want to effectively market and have contacts and have this whole thing be worth their while, they need them. Obviously, people have their own data that they've accumulated over time. What have you seen working with your companies? Because I know we're having these discussions with our clients. What kind of data do you have? What's yours? What are you buying? What's available from the show? And then sort of working things from what you have to operate from.
I'm going to start at 30,000 feet and come a little closer. So when it comes to marketing in general, there's basically 3 buckets. You have paid. So I'm either going to have to rent the list, and some shows will say, hey, we have this communication portal. You can sign up with a premium package. You can do X. You may have certain media associations who are affiliated with a show or a sponsor of the show where they'll allow you like, hey, leading up to the show, you can do this many touch points, might be a mix of email or article, etc. Then there's earned. So same thing, instead of paid, if you can build a relationship with somebody who has the audience attention. So if it's a trade association and they're the sponsor of the show, if you have that, get on their podcast, get in their social media groups. Like, there are ways to engage. And then the middle one is owned. And that is kind of the holy grail. That is building your own email list. Old school, that's the Rolodex, that's your salespeople. But the faster you can figure out how to leverage those 2 components and drive people to something you control, the better you're going to be. And that's not necessarily something that's going to come from this year's trade show. It's going to come from years of experience in building it out. And it needs to be thought of as the long game. And for those who are doing it, or you've just come into a role and it might be your first year with a trade show, it's the hardest year because data is getting harder and harder and harder to get access to. So you need to be mindful of, how do I convert like either paid or earned data and get it into something that I can control? Because for the most part, whether it's a show or a social media platform, that's how they monetize. Like, you're paying to go there to have access to an audience. They don't want you circumventing that and being able to just download or scrape a list and then target them anyway. So they're getting tighter and tighter about protecting that. So I think there's not necessarily an easy answer of how to get it, other than to treat it as a long game and figure out how do we be more responsive at trade shows or leading up to trade shows to get people to opt in, so it becomes first party data, so your company data, so that you have control of it going forward.
You know what I think all the time about this? It is tricky. And there's a lot of different avenues when people are going to trade shows. You have people looking for partners. You have people looking for suppliers. You have sometimes people looking for direct customers and the audience. It's a lot of different avenues, right? But one thing that I find interesting is that a lot of these events now have an app. And as you get closer to the event, people start to register and get on the app, right? And there are forms of communication. And I think that there is the right way of doing things and the wrong way of doing things. But if you are at a trade show for a purpose, if you know who you are looking to engage and why you are looking to engage them, I don't see anything wrong with a week or 3, 4, 5 days prior to that show, reaching out to some select individuals on that app with a very concise, don't waste their time message. Hey, we are running an offsite happy hour on X night. We wanted to invite you because you're an ideal audience for us, and we'd love to learn more about you and why you're at this show. Authenticity, the genuineness in what you're asking. They either want to know what you're doing and have an interest, or they don't. And if they don't, you can't trick them to get them there. So you might as well ask in a way that if they do have a inkling of, I might want to go see them, they could possibly show up. I would utilize those apps. I would utilize the contacts that are in there. I just think you have to do it the right way.
I think, again, the theme keeps coming up about the onus on salespeople. Like, you need to train your people on the modes of communication. Like, let them know, like, hey guys, we need everybody registered for the app by this day. Like, again, go back to the numbers. Like, each person needs to bring 5 people to this event, and say by any means necessary. And they should have a list of prospects. They should be actively prospecting. And it's just, it takes a lot of work and a lot of discipline to have a successful trade show. It's not easy. And if you really want to grow and get an ROI, like, you got to show up at the important times, which is pre, during, and post.
Doug, I recently had a woman named Nancy Toohill. She was on my podcast, really good event marketer. And she said something to me that I just started laughing on the podcast, but then I thought about it afterwards. She was just like, doing trade shows and events the right way is a lot of work. And I was like, man, you're really right when you say it that way. It is. And most people don't want to go through the energy, the time, and the effort. But what I would push upon people is, like, the spends are big. And that's why the spends get questioned. That's why they get cut. That's why when you reach for more budget, they're like, well, what's the return? I don't know. How many times I've heard people say, a salesperson for a company that walks into a medical device show 3 times a year says, oh, these don't work. And I'm like, well, how do you know that? So I think it's on the event marketers and people running these shows who get given these programs. If you want to do it the right way, it does take significant effort. It does. It's time consuming. It's tireless. It's thankless. There's a lot of negatives to it, but also being a really good event marketer and running a program, I think, puts you in a very select few people, because there are just so many programs that are flying blind.
100%. And it's funny, we used the example when we were doing the training last week. I said, listen, this is what we're asking of you as a sales team. You can either work for these 12 weeks and it's going to feel like 3 days at football, like you were going to grind it out, and then you can be lazy the rest of the year, or you can be lazy for this next 12 weeks and you're going to have to bust your butt the rest of the year to try to make up the gap. And that little mindset shift to realize, like, if I really put this much effort, just this like 3 to 6 weeks leading into a trade show across the board, marketing, sales, leadership, like, if you put that much attention and you treat this like a playoff game or like a championship, because that's where most of your sales, or at least that's the kickoff to your sales opportunities, the rest of the year kind of takes care of itself if you can just do fundamental follow-up. But putting the level of attention into it and treating it like it is 80% of your, like, for most companies, it's probably 80% of their budget. Treat it
Like
like that.
it's big
Like give it
sometimes. Yeah.
80% of the effort.
Let's kind of jump to maybe the backside of this stuff. I think we've done a good job on the pre. Well, hold on. I got a question from Mel here. I always like to take questions from Mel. Mel, what's going on, my friend? Mel said, Matt, your team did an amazing job at Exhibitor Live creating content post-show for social media. Mel, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Does Doug have other suggestions for capturing valuable, engaging content for use later? And thank you, Bianca, for seconding that.
100%. Like you can never have enough footage. And the interesting thing, and this is a little bit more on the brain science, when we build relationships with people, they're usually anchored in specific moments in time. And you probably all have been to trade shows. You're like, oh, I remember meeting this person. We went to this specific restaurant and we did this after. Like you end up creating anchors and foundations of new relationships. And people generally do a poor job of going back to some of those anchors. And it can be as simple as like just taking photos. It can be taking videos. If there's a keynote speaker, whether they're famous or not, or had a really good slide, being meticulous about documenting those points in time and then sharing them is incredibly valuable, even up to a year later. I mean, we all get the notifications, hey, a year ago, this happened on our phone. It might be that trade show. And if you become disciplined about finding the value, and this goes back, Matt said this at the beginning, like understand why your prospect's there. And if that's answered by a keynote speaker or something you saw, and you're able to re-deliver that value on a social post, ideally video is better, you're able to reinstill like it's, oh, this person understands what I'm looking for. And now I have a reason to connect. And when you do the post show, which I know we're transitioning into now anyways, when you're able to say, hey, I know we talked at the show, we met at the show, not sure if you got to attend all the sessions, but here's the 5 big takeaways, and it's a video you guys created. That's an incredible follow-up tool because you're going to continue from that point in time when you met, deliver value. And now there's a reason to follow up, not just like, hey, I want you to buy from me. Like you can lead with value. So the more disciplined you are about figuring out like, what is it that I'm taking away that these people need to have, the better that content's going to land and the better that it's going to have the stickiness to take off with other prospects similar to those people.
And Mel, I think on the back of what Doug said there is like one of the things that I took away from Exhibitor Live and talking to event marketers, one of the themes I took is that so many of these people that I spoke to, they're there to get better. They want to be better. They want to know what's next. How can they solve this problem? How can they get their program from here to there? So for me, that just made me want to double down on what we were doing because we were having conversations that maybe a clip, they would be like, oh shit, we haven't done that. That would be great, right? Like those clips would help, as you're saying, capturing value and engaging content for later down the road. And I think it all goes back to when you're at those shows, who is your audience? Why are they there? And then how can you bring them value? And if you can find a way to capture, a lot of people try to capture themselves as being, I don't want to say being cool because not like that, but they try to capture like, oh, look at our booth or what we're doing. And all that video content is good. I do think marketing your presence with drone footage and things is good. So I'm not bashing it at all because we do it for our clients. And I think it's something has to be done, but I'm saying, how can you capture stuff that is selfless, that is then going to your customer? That for me, and it's challenging. It's not easy, but I think that's definitely a direction to push, for your customers. All right, Doug, let's go post-show. I think post-show is incredibly important. I think a lot, especially bigger companies, it falls by the wayside because they're too spread out, not enough connectivity. I think that not enough people are using a really good lead capture software, things that are going into CRMs, organized, personalized information for proper follow-up. Where does the follow-up go? Blah, 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 blah. I can go on forever. Good follow-up is really, in my opinion, you put all this time, energy, effort into pre-show, your strategy, your presence, your show. Now you got to go, you got to go bring the bacon home, right? You got to actually produce. Follow-up is what produces. So let me gather your thoughts on this here.
I'm going to tell you the single best thing you can do as a sales and marketing team to I'm going to go as far as saying, if you do this, I can guarantee you'll double your revenue from a show. And it is going to suck for the sales and marketing team. Every day at the end of the show, start your follow-up. Start your follow-up at the end of every day. Do not wait till you get home, because what's going to happen, you're going to get a 6-hour flight delay in Dallas. You're going to get home to the chaos of the kids. And you get sucked into email in the morning. Right there's 48 hours gone. And that's why, like, that Fibonacci sequence we use, like being very specific. If you have 2 touch points within 24 hours, the amount of recall that person has of who you are is exponentially higher than even if I just go one weekend. Life happens. So if you can get detailed and disciplined enough to, at the end of each trade show day, do a soft touch. Hey, Matt, thanks for taking the time to stop by your booth. My name's Doug. I am the salesperson. I will be following up, but I just want to let you know I've received your request and I will be the one following up with you. Like, not enough attention or detail goes into how to follow up with people. And if you can just move it up just that little bit, and that's, again, go back to the tactics assessment. Those first impressions and those first touch points matter. I can't tell you the number of times, like, we've done post-show audits with companies, and I'm like, well, let's run through the show me your trade. So, it's been a month and they have not followed up. And that's inexcusable. So getting a detailed process and just doing it at the show is the first biggest lever you can win. The second, and this has to happen before the show, is figure out, again, what are you sending them? Like, what was the goal? What do you want the next interaction to be? And then hold both sales and marketing accountable. If you have, and I would say, like, anybody doing a trade show, you should have some type of marketing automation software. You don't need to go buy HubSpot or anything. You can use any tool, but just be disciplined about getting them in and getting them in that follow-up sequence quickly, and make sure you're delivering value. So part of what we just talked about, like capturing the summary of the event, well, that means, like, we got to be on it, we got to deliver it. And then that's the kickoff to our follow-up sequence. Hey, it was really good to see you. Here's what we took through the end. Here's where you can learn about it. All of those things kind of stack and add value, but the faster and more disciplined you are about doing it, the better you're going to be.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think, Doug, what makes me think is, like, a lot of companies exhibiting are different size. Some are small, more nimble. Their quantity of leads that come in are smaller than some that are taking on high volume, right? So you have to understand what that is. I mean, if you're not working with that many leads at a given trade show, if it's not a crazy high volume, right? I mean, I would have somebody organizing them, putting notes to them, and not leaving things to change. You could do it in Excel. And it doesn't need to be complicated. Do anything, but the organization, the personalization of information. Say you're having a conversation with somebody and something comes up, a resource that they maybe were looking for. You got to be the one to recommend a place for them to go down the line. I don't care if it's dinner or a software. You should be the one to kick them something in the day saying, hey, Megan, it's Matt from Rockway. We were talking earlier today. Thanks for coming by. I remember you were looking. Here's that contact I told you I would get you. Soft things, that personalization there. Doug, we got a question from Kimberly. Kimberly, thanks for the question. It says, keeping sales KPIs is a must. Consider it a project and complete the pre, during, and after, and you have a lovely cycle of business. Agreed. Do you have any favorite software or forms you use to create or gather data, the entire process of the show, pre, during, and follow-up?
That entirely depends on the size of company and what the goals are. In my experience, I have found the less dependent on a software company is, the better. The training we just did, literally printed sheets, put them on a clipboard, get them in your truck. These are your goals, write them down, and that'll work for some. Bigger organizations, you will have it. When it comes, and again, depending on the size of your organization and the level of the KPIs, having some basic level software will be helpful for tracking the life cycle of a customer. So for example, you may meet them at a trade, like, you're going to prospect them, you're going to meet them at a trade show, and it may take 9 months to close them. You're probably going to have that in some form of a CRM. I would definitely start with an Excel spreadsheet shared amongst a sales team, but Some is better than others. The other thing about KPIs, and this is really important to understand, is the difference between leading KPIs and lagging. The leading KPIs are more the activities you want the salespeople to do. So outreach on LinkedIn, the number of prospecting calls they've done, the number of drops of direct mail. Those are all like actions or activities. Those are leading numbers. The lagging is the result of the activity. So, hey, they made 20 outreaches on LinkedIn and they got 5 people to show up to the result or to the event. Understanding the correlation between the activity and the result is really, really important. And it's understand that when you set those KPIs, it also allows you to figure out who's accountable to what. So just make sure like when you're setting those KPIs are really relevant to the bigger goal and understand the duration of how long you have to track it. That'll help you pick the right software, or if you even need a software and if Excel's good enough for where you're at.
Yeah, I think the idea of what we're talking about is the size of your organization, the size, that show, contacts, leads, qualify. I think we're all looking for quality over quantity. I think you have to have a way of sorting through the quantity to get to the quality quickly, and then be able to build personalization for that follow-up on those quality leads. So there are a lot of softwares. There are a lot of ways of tracking it. And there are some very good ones now. There really are. I know Captello, Ryan and his team over there, we've had conversations with them. I think their software is simple. It's a per event use charge, which is great. They do make it fairly simple to capture contacts, information, scanning. If you're in a larger space and you have 7 stations or areas and sections of your booth or an event, you can capture by the area that those people are coming into. There's some really creative stuff. The organizations, they connect into your software. So depending how much integration you want to do, there are softwares out there. Another question, Doug, from Kevin Core. He says, Doug, how many follow-ups are you typically sending in your sequences?
So if you Google Fibonacci sequence, what it allows you to do is back it out. Typically, immediately after, there are 2. One is usually the courtesy thank you. One is something of value. Next day, you're sending 1. 3 days later, you're sending 1. 5 days later, you're sending 1. And then 8 days. The challenge we see more often not leading into and behind an event is people aren't communicating enough. As long as your communications either add value or move the prospect along a journey, you're not going to over communicate with them. Where communication or email follow-up goes wrong is when it's more predatory. Like, hey, you gotta get on this call. You're gonna miss this opportunity, and high pressure.
What are you offering?
Yeah.
What are you offering? What do you have to go to them with?
100%. Like, make my life better or easier, or move me closer to my goal. You can reach out to me as much as you want, but if you're detailed and understand the customer journey and understand hey, if you said, hey, I'm going to follow up with you these times, do that. But if you have, again, that's why pre-show is important. You should have the post-show done weeks in advance and understand this is where the most value is going to come and what we're going to deliver. It makes your sales process so much easier. So honestly, I would, for the most part, you can't communicate enough.
I agree. I also think that personalization, Doug, is big. What
100%.
are you going to me with? What are you coming to me with? Because if you're just coming after and hitting me with an email saying, hey, met you at the show, would love to set up a conversation, I don't think that's enough. I think that's where the personalization in your space at the event, what are you coming back to me with? Is it raffles do have a reason to a degree, but are you offering something in a raffle that's worth everybody's time, or are you raffling me crap, right? Raffle me something that I'm going to love and I'm going to answer your email. No doubt about it. You offer me a golf trip around at Pebble Beach. Let me tell you something. You can call me day, night, text, email, smoke signal. I'm picking up. All right. So raffles do have a purpose to a degree. And then what also of value are you coming back to me with? Like you said, can you help me solve a problem? So meaningful follow-up. I think it's huge. Anything else we want to touch on, Doug, in terms of post-show other than obviously being organized, personalization, the sequencing, following up enough, making sure your sales team has everything that they need? Any other tidbits, any other piece of advice or detailed stuff we can get into?
There's a big piece that I think a lot of people need to understand, and they need to really, really know the customer buying cycle. They may have met you at a trade show. You might be the best person to solve their problem, but they might be between a contract. They might not be wrapping up for 9 months, or they might need to go through a very long procurement process that might take them close to the next show. So understanding how to qualify a prospect and get an honest answer of where they really are in their buying cycle and having mechanisms to follow up is vital, especially if you sell a product that's, let's say, high 5 or 6 figures, and it's just a long buying cycle. You need to align that with your post show. Post show isn't always 2 weeks after the show. It might be 9 months. And you need to take that stuff into account, because going back to Kimberly's question, you're asked to present, and we run this all the time because so much of what we think about is like quarterly performance. But the number of prospects or people I've met that don't buy for 18 months later, but I need to show the return of, does a trade show work? But if you as a marketer or anyone in marketing leadership can say, like, listen, this is actually our buying cycle. And here's what happens. We see this a ton of times in agriculture. Okay. A farmer's not going to all of a sudden say, hey, I met you at this year's seed show. Tell you what, I'm going to plant only your seeds this year. He's not going to risk his business. He's going to be like, tell you what, I'm going to give you a few acres. And if it performs, I'll give you a few more next year. So the goal for the trade show isn't just this year's performance. It's, I need to understand where they're at in the buying cycle, how I add value, and how I build a customer for life. And if you start to adopt that level of thinking and acquiring customers for life, you can start to change your trade show strategy to meet them back. So next year's like, hey, Matt, great seeing you. Glad you're back. Hey, man, let's grab lunch. I know you're going to be there. Let's talk about how our product performed and how we can get more acreage and better performance on your farm. You can build more intent, and then it's easier. Hey, he's probably going to bring somebody with him. So if you stop thinking as just single events and start focusing on how do what we do build lifetime customers, everything you do in trade shows for the next 3 to 5 years is going to become easier every single year. You're going to get better data. You're going to get better performance. You're going to get better feedback. But we need to stop thinking and looking at marketing as a single point in time, but more of like, how do we touch the customer as they go through the entire journey of their life cycle?
Doug, I think I love that you brought this up, right? And I don't even need to really add to it because I think it's perfect, but I'm going to shift it into something else I think is important that piggybacks on that, which I know a lot of event marketers are struggling with, which is measuring ROI and being able to show the worth of their program. Having an understanding of your customer buying cycle and what happens at a trade show, I think allows you to better quantify your ROI, or as I've started to kind of label, I've been saying, like, pipeline impact. Do you have pipeline impact at your shows? It's not just, hey, how many deals went through? I think there's so many things that happens at a trade show, right? How many deals did you add into the top that maybe were not in your pipeline? Did you add fresh deals in? Those are always what people are looking for. Then, do you have any deals that are in your pipeline at a certain stage that are maybe accelerating faster during the period of a trade show? And does this consistently happen year over year? So it's proving that, hey, at this show, for some reason, we move Farmer John and Jane down the road a little bit further for some reason, right? And then also, are we accelerating the purchasing and the closing of deals? Does the rate jump? So I don't really have it figured out just yet, but it's like pipeline impact, because I think everybody's trying to track, okay, we met you at a trade show. We talked to you over X amount of time. We closed this deal. It came from a trade show, but I'll bet you can have a lot of people argue that that lead maybe originated somewhere else. Maybe it didn't. You could have a lot of discussions on it and debates, but pipeline impact, I think, is something that goes with this buyer journey because it stretches over a period of time. So I don't know your thoughts on that. I'm kind of flushing it out as I go over time here.
I think it's genius. I will tell you, so we implemented, it's almost 2 years ago now, that like we will not work with a client unless we document the customer journey. And the number of people who probably go into a trade show, you probably come across this more than anybody, that don't even understand their pipeline or customer journey. They just do trade shows because that's what you're supposed to do, right? Step one is like, what is our customer journey? At what point is this trade show intersecting in it? And then who is coming? So if you just wanted to look at pipeline impact, for example, there's kind of 3 buckets I'd be looking at. One, how do we get existing customers to buy more? That's the easiest sale we can possibly have. Those people are the easiest to get to the booth. Number 2, who's our warm prospects? And to your point, how do we accelerate them through the purchase cycle? Okay, that's the second easiest. And the third, how are we getting net new? And if, like anyone in the finance or leadership team, if they looked at a trade through those 3 different lenses, it's a lot easier to quantify and justify the trade show expense. But if it's just like, oh, how many sales did we get? Well, 50% of marketing works, 50% doesn't. We just don't know which 50%. Well, we can take that out of the equation if we look at it with just those 3 in mind, because we can see, okay, hey, you know what? I had this guy sitting on the fence. He came to the booth, he bought. I can check that off as that was the catalyst. Or, hey, these deals are now into negotiation post-event. I can check that off. And hey, now we have 20% more leads. I can measure that. But if they just lump it all into one, it's really hard to measure.
You know what it makes me think of? We were working with a client once and we're sort of having these discussions about, tell us about the customer. How many different types are they? Who are they? Why are all these different discussions? And that kind of bled into, where are you having issues? And one of the issues that said they were having was dealing with their current customers. Because you're at a trade show and you're just getting, there's all these new shiny objects and you're like, oh, and you're chasing them, but you forget for this, and it's not all companies, but for this one, in our discovery phase, we started learning that, hey, they have an issue where a big number of their customers are there and they are looking for help with the software. One-on-one, sit down, walk me through. I've been integrating this for the last X months or whatever it is, and I'm struggling. And it was a simple solution. We just built out this area, a designated area. It's like comfortable, relaxing, inviting, a cool little hangout with a TV, with a demo stand and everything. And it was like everybody in their space just knew this is for our customers. So then they had people coming over and we're like, yeah, John's over there. He can help you. No problem. We're ready for this. And worked. So just understanding those little pieces and making those adjustments, I think, can be vital at your shows.
But see, how many people, like, if they came to you and said, hey, like, this is our customer journey, and they came to you as like the trade show partner, and they knew the type of experience, like, it makes your job that much easier. Like, you can build something that's going to help them get a better return. But I think if people just slowed down a little bit and just looked at the landscape of what they're trying to do, they could move a lot faster.
I think that conversation for me is interesting. I feel like we're trying to push that direction with our customers, where we're trying to get them to think this way. But what I've started to learn is a lot of event marketers, they really do get thrown in the flames. They're not an event marketer, they're a marketer, but then all of a sudden they're handed a trade show program. They don't have really the stakeholders help. They don't really have training, and they're just like, hey, go figure this out. Well, what happens? Then you're landlocked into, oh shit, like you just want to get the basics, the logistics, the showing up, make sure that there's so much stuff with trade shows and events, and it's a lot to manage. And you get someone who's probably talented, good marketer, ambitious, but they're stuck. So a lot of trade show programs kind of struggle because of that. And it does take a very polished event marketer over time, learning to then say, hey, like, whoa, there's a whole strategy out here. The logistics of it should just be handled for me. I'm looking for the strategy. I'm looking for the intentionality. I'm looking to really drive results and be thinking about these things. I think it's a little bit of an industry problem, honestly. I think a lot of leadership and executive stakeholder teams at big companies aren't giving the events program what they really need, because it is a cost of doing business versus an event strategy per se.
I agree. I think it's systemic across the board in marketing. Whether it's events, social media, they do treat it as an expense and an afterthought as opposed to a mechanism or an investment.
And And I know it's true, Doug, because some of the best event marketers from doing this podcast and some of our best clients, some of the companies that we know are getting results, know are spending, $250,000 to $1 million, whatever it is a year, they're driving real results. They are. It's there for a reason. And a lot of those they have buy-in from the stakeholders. Everything is, I don't want to say perfectly calculated, but it's there. And then a lot of people that you talk to where they're not sure if they're getting results, they don't know, they maybe want to step it up, but they can't get the budget, they're not sure, is because they don't have that alignment or that support for whatever reason it may be from the stakeholders, from executive teams, whatever you want to call them.
100%.
We're a little over an hour here. I do like to be mindful of people's time, although, Doug, I think I could talk about this stuff with you all day. So let me close up with my favorite. And I love to ask you this question because you're a very, you've had your own podcast, you've interviewed, you've written a book, you've worked different companies, you've started different companies, you've had a really cool journey. You've done TED Talks, which is cool. What is advice to your younger self?
It's funny you ask because I'm going through that process, writing another book on identity right now. But the biggest thing I look back at is the importance of going to events and building relationships. The reason I was successful had to do with the people that I engaged with, the people that I met, you being one of them. I mean, my college experience was probably incredibly defining for me. But across the board, like going to events and being intentional about building relationships with people and then playing the long game. It's so easy to be transactional. And like when you meet somebody, figure, I was like, what can I get from this person? But if you really just focus on meeting people and figuring out like, what can I do to help that person? You'll build lifelong relationships. I mean, it's been 10 years and we're still talking and like figuring out how can we help grow each other's business. Having a focus on meeting people and building meaningful relationships, that's where real success comes from.
That makes me think, just thinking about that, because I'm in the events industry. I do go to a lot of events. The trade show event world is fairly tight-knit in certain sectors. So you saying that makes me think, as a young person running a business and doing what I'm doing, there are certain people that were selfless to me and have been selfless and didn't have any real reason to do it. People like Dick Wheeler, people like Dave Wallens, people like Rick Bellergeau, like people that just were like, hey, I mean, no business didn't need to help me, didn't need to reach out, didn't need to make that connection, that personalization. And it's people that I really don't forget, people that I speak highly of, Michael McMahon, Chris Griffin. I can go on and on of people that were good to me as a young person trying to find my way in this industry. So I think that authenticity, that selflessness that you're talking about at events in person, I think it's incredible advice and completely rings true for people. Doug, where can people find you?
Best place online, you can just Google Douglas J. Foley. You will find me on almost all platforms. Instagram tends to be where I'm most active, just at Douglas J. Foley. You find our agency at Giant Goat, and then the book you can find on Amazon.
Awesome. Doug, thanks for showing up, my friend. Your wealth of knowledge. I knew you were going to crush this episode. It's awesome talking to you. Everybody who showed up, I know we've been a little gaps in these shows. I was super impressed with the attendance today, the quality of the attendance, the questions. We really want this summer tour to kind of kick ass and have some great guests on. So I look forward and hope everybody shows up. Hopefully we are driving you a ton of value. We are live next week. Ish has put it in the chat. July 25th. It's a Tuesday. We're going to be at 3 p.m. just so everybody knows. We have Aaron Kaufman. He's the president at Fifth Element Group. Aaron is a great interview. He has a lot of really strong opinions on the event industry. It will be a little bit more of us talking about what's wrong with the industry next week. And I think he has some really interesting things to say that will resonate with some people. So I hope you show up. I hope you join. Doug, buddy, thank you, man. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure to hang out with you, my friend.